I'd like to introduce Nicola Harrison, who is Head of Creative Insights at Retail Week, and I'm Tim Gardner, who's Head of Creative Partnerships, and I'll be asking the questions, and Nick will be giving you some good answers today. So, how we actually put this report together, we used Retail Week prospect data, which is our kind of in-house data department, and we ranked retailers based on operating profit figures. So we used UK figures wherever available, and otherwise group operating figures, and this is from July 2018. And the ranking is based on profit growth rather than absolute earnings in pounds, so we could give you some useful takeaways for retailers of all sizes. When compiling the data for this report, just 60 of the 180 retailers that we have in prospect could actually boast a rise in yearly earnings, so only a third. And keeping up with consumer demands is a costly business. Retailers are plowing huge amounts of money into customer-facing capabilities, improved fulfillment, etc. And all this investment is coming on top, as you will well know, of rising costs associated with the living wage, business rates, and obviously Brexit. So Nick, what is putting pressure on profits in this environment? What factors are at play?
Well, can everyone hear me, by the way? Because thank you. You mentioned a few of them there. So retailers, since the dawn of time, have had to deal with costs associated with property, so rents and rates, that's nothing new. And people, of course, all those costs are going in one direction, and that's up. But alongside that, and on top of that, we've got new challenges that retailers are facing in the last couple of years in the sort of digital environment. So we've got customer expectations are getting greater and greater, and one of the areas is fulfillment. So same day, next day delivery, all that kind of stuff, that costs money, right? And then there's the customer experience around stores. So retailers want their shops to stand out on the high street and to attract customers, which is a difficult business today. So having really sexy store design and lots of amazing merchandise offer it costs money. And then there's policy pressures. So the living wage has piled huge costs onto retailers' existing wage costs, and that's a really big factor as well in the last year or two. You've got Brexit. We can't not mention Brexit. We don't know how that's going to play out yet, but we do know it's going to affect sourcing costs to some degree. And then we've got the reason why we're all sat here today, which is technology, and there is increasing pressure on retailers to keep up with their rivals and also to keep up with customer demand on that front. So whether it's customer-facing stuff or back-end applications, replatforming, whatever it may be, this costs money. And when sales growth is so hard to come by, it can paint a quite bleak picture for some retailers, which is, as you mentioned, why only a third of the top 180 retailers we looked at produced any profit growth at all in the last year.
Yes, we see technology is kind of an all-encompassing thing that retailers are having to deal with. How is technology actually helping retailers to drive efficiencies?
Yeah, so like I just said, it obviously has a massive upfront cost, but if you invest wisely, it can drive efficiencies in the long term. So the last few years we've been seeing Apple, who topped this ranking, in particular have made the sort of mobile payment. When I mean mobile payment, I mean mobile in a store. So a store associate comes up to you and helps you pay. They've been doing that for years, and that drives efficiencies and conversion, which is good for the bottom line. Staying in the store environment, self-service tills, not everyone loves them, but when they work well, they drive efficiencies in stores, shorter queues, happier customers, greater conversion again. Kiosks and tablets in stores help drive sales and a greater ROI within the physical environment, which is obviously really important as rents and rates are going up. And then people is the big one that everyone's really talking about in terms of technology and automation. Everyone's been reading lots about this lately. I think it is going to have a huge impact. So there are many scores of jobs at the moment that are being done by humans, by people in stores, that will be automated in the coming years, and that's going to save retailers hundreds and thousands of pounds. Sainsbury's is a good example. So it's using PeopleSoft to help its store staff do things like book holidays, sort out their rotas, and these are functions that were done centrally, and now they're not going to be, and that's going to be a big cost saving for Sainsbury's. And I think we will see more of that, where digitalization and automation is going to really transform those kind of sort of mundane tasks. And the flip side, the positive side of all this is it leaves store staff with more time to do more interesting things and things that are going to benefit the bottom line and the top line in terms of, you know, speaking to customers instead of stock checking. So people is another big area. Other technologies that will drive efficiencies, RFID tags. So obviously if retailers have a better handle on where their stock is across the business, that's going to drive obvious top line and bottom line benefits. Dynamic pricing tools, which not only allow retailers to remain more competitive, they're able to monitor the prices among their competition and drop prices if they need to drive sales. But they can also actually increase prices in line with demand, which is really powerful. Sainsbury's and Tesco are already trialing this sort of stuff, and that has obvious benefits to margins. And the other big area I think technology is helping in terms of keeping costs down is returns. So returns is a big issue for retailers at the moment, particularly online fashion retailers. For ASOS in particular, we all know it's quite a big headache for them, and they've been doing a lot of work in this area, investing in to try and keep returns as low as possible. So a few things they're doing quite interesting. So they have really good size guides on the website, fitting guides. They have detailed videos where they have models of 3 different sizes showing what that particular product looks like on them to give you a better idea. They have the latest technology they're using is working out what you've returned in the past and what you've bought in the past to work out what fit would be good for you and to recommend products that you're less likely to return. And then they're also using sizing data. So you input as a customer your weight and your height and any other dimensions that they've got on there, and they will present to you a recommendation of a product size based on that data, which is streets ahead of lots of the retailers. It's really interesting, and they'll recommend it based on brands. So you might be a medium in River Island and then a large in Monkey, for instance. So that's helped them. And I think technology that really drives down costs is where retailers need to be investing, although that's easier said than done because we don't always know where those areas are.
This kind of vast proliferation of technology obviously leads to huge volumes of data for retailers. What part do you think data plays in driving profitability?
Inevitably, it can have a huge role. I think possibly the biggest area would be identifying your most loyal and your highest spending customers, because they're the ones that are going to drive really profitable sales. You don't want to really be chasing one-off customers looking for bargains. That's an expensive sale. If you can keep customers coming back and identify those customers that are coming back, then, you know, we just talked about returns. If a customer is familiar with your product and their expectations are set, they're less likely to return goods because they know about your brand and your products, so they know what they're getting. So it's really important to use data to pinpoint your high-value customers. Also, there's data around when people shop. So if you know that your website, for example, is really busy at lunchtime, then maybe you tailor certain marketing messages around those times. Or if you know, if Amazon knows that Tim likes to shop in the morning, then it might send you a few prompts at around that time of products that you might like to buy. So that can be really helpful too. It can accurately, and the keyword here is accurately, help predict shopping trends. So instead of guessing at it, which is what a lot of retailers had to do in the last few years, and backing wrong products and that sort of thing, data can help you really get a good idea about what trends are going to take off and help you back the right products. of course, that is going to help the bottom line. So yeah, I mean, that's just a tiny fraction of how data can drive the bottom line.
Huge efficiencies
Yeah.
to be had when you use the data in the right way. And what could more traditional retailers learn from kind of leaner, newer businesses?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one because newer, leaner businesses their cost bases are much lower. They don't have to deal with the huge costs that the big legacy multi-channel retailers are facing. However, there are a few ways I think the bigger retailers can learn, and that's around marketing. So I think the sort of upstarts of retail, so I'm thinking people like Missguided, they're really good at using social for their marketing. And the ROI on social is so much clearer and better than your traditional huge above-the-line marketing campaign. So they leverage that really well, and that's probably the best way to talk to Gen Z, which is their shopper. And they also leverage content. So editorial content, they're like pioneers, those younger e-tailers. And that really helps speak to those customers as well. And they don't really feel the need to plough millions and millions and millions of pounds on a big Christmas TV ad campaign. They almost don't need to. So I think the bigger retailers could probably learn a thing or two, and they are learning from that sort of strategy of marketing.
Really like knowing your consumer and how the new consumer's behaving. So kind of moving on to the supply chain, this has obviously traditionally been an area that's a huge cost to retailers, and in light of Brexit, it's only going to get more expensive. What's being done here to mitigate costs?
Not enough, I don't think. It always surprises me that supply chain is an area that is so costly for retailers, and it's only going to get more so. Yet, I don't think there's enough innovation going on in this area. I read something the other day that in the US, lorries travel for 50 billion miles every year without any goods in their back. So they're traveling empty for 50 billion lorries, which is so wasteful. 50 billion miles. That's nearly a third of the total mileage all the lorries in America do every year. It's so wasteful. So those kind of things are sparking new technologies in America. So there are apps now available that, a bit like Uber, they hook up lorry drivers with merchandisers and retailers and brands who want to get product from A to B to make better use of lorries. But there's so much waste that goes on. I think the stories that are most interesting are the retailers that are collaborating on this kind of stuff. So I think it's The Entertainer and their logistics provider XPO. So The Entertainer allows XPO to use its spare warehousing and lorry fleet for XPO's other clients when The Entertainer's not busy. And then they both share in the sales and profits generated. And I know B&Q has supposedly lent lorries to supermarkets over the busy Christmas period because Christmas isn't busy for DIY retailers. So it's those pockets of collaboration which can really bring costs down, but we're just not seeing much of it. So I think there needs to be more innovation. Everyone always points to, in terms of supply chain efficiencies, the Argos fast track service, which leverages its 800-strong store network via its hub and spoke initiative, which is one of the reasons Sainsbury's bought it 2 years ago. So Argos is making real gains there. Other areas that retailers are trying to reduce costs, retailers like John Lewis and Tesco introducing minimum spend for click and collect. Everyone was quite shocked when John Lewis did that a couple of years ago. It seems to be working because they haven't dropped the minimum spend. And it's helping their profits, although they didn't make it onto our ranking. And obviously their profits have been battered the last couple of years. But I think more retailers might follow suit in that area as well. And then Lush, who came second in the ranking, they benefit from their vertically integrated business model. Now, retailers can't go ripping up their business models and suddenly own their entire supply chain, but it does bring obvious benefits, and that is why Lush has grown profit strongly this year. It's controlling its own product development, and it can keep a handle on all the margins within the supply chain as well.
Moving on to physical stores, traditionally another huge cost for retailers. Are there any examples of how retailers being more efficient in this area?
Yeah, there are quite a lot of examples because they have to be. It's such a big cost for retailers. So Ted Baker, who are in the top 20 of the report, they've been focusing in some stores on turnover rents, which is better for the bottom line because they're sharing the risk with the landlord. Then you have Tesco, who are increasing the proportion of freeholds that they have across their estate, which is helping them too. And then there's subletting, which is getting fairly popular. So Next, I don't know if anyone saw it, Next opened quite a large store on Oxford Street last week, and they've got concessions from HEMA, from Paperchase, Costa Coffee, and Clark's, all in a Next store, which sounds very much like a department store to me. And they'll be making savings on the rent bill, and those brands that are in the Next store will be making, it's a less risky expansion strategy because they're not tied into long leases. So that's proving fruitful, I think, for those retailers. And then you have the other extreme of retailers like, well, it is really just Amazon Go and a couple more equivalents in China where they've stripped out people costs altogether, and it's run entirely by tech. Everyone's read about this. But the technology obviously does come at a price.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So kind of the third major cost, as you just touched on there, people. I think traditionally is the biggest cost to a retailer's business. And in various ways, kind of the pressure is kind of intensified, really. What are your thoughts on kind of the cost of people to a business?
Well, we mentioned living wage earlier. Obviously, that's piled more pressure on. I mean, one of the obvious ways to reduce people costs is to reduce people, right? And we've seen drastic redundancy programs from all the big retailers in the last year or two as they try and restructure in the digital age. Arguably, their headcount had ballooned to such an extent that there needed to be a bit of a reset anyway. But what they don't want to do is go too far and sort of lose the human customer service element and the heart of the business by making too many cuts. Waterstones also, which was number 4 in our ranking, had quite a dramatic turnaround the last couple of years. They cut staff by 25% in the 2015-2016 to just under 3,000 people, which seems like a huge redundancy program, and it was. But it's those kind of bold decisions that are needed if you're going to shore up the bottom line, I think. And also, as I mentioned earlier, technology that replaces some of these roles can help the other roles in terms of freeing up hours for them. So Tesco said, really interesting, its half-year results, how simpler structures and changes to its replenishment model had freed staff up for more than 45,000 additional hours, which they could instead spend serving shoppers. So benefits to the top and bottom line. But yeah, obviously that comes with costs as well, redundancy programs.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for.